Well, the U.S. military, and for that matter any organization, runs on funding. So if you cut funding, you have to cut functions. The Southern Command, which encompasses everything in the Caribbean and in Latin America south of Mexico. Mexico falls into the Northern Command area of operations. But as you cut funding, and we've got some severe cuts in front of us, that you also have to cut functions. And in our case, in terms of transnational organized crime, and you've got to remember that it's just not a military effort down there. We are, to say the least, part of a whole of government, whole of U.S. government, and frankly, the U.S. is only one of a number of partners that deal with counter organized crime efforts. So it's a whole of government approach. I have FBI, DEA, Treasury, Justice, Border Patrol, ICE. It goes on and on and on and on. So we're all in this one effort together. Well, all of those agencies are being cut severely. So things like our efforts on the high seas to stop illicit drugs, as an example, from coming up through Latin America into the United States will be severely impacted. And the reverse of that is true as well. The unbelievable profits that come out of the United States because of the drug trade, particularly cocaine. Billions and billions and billions of dollars a year. That money will come south to be laundered. And other government agencies that I work with have lost funding. So much of that money will not be found, but rather will get back into the money system. Of course, the profits not only fund more illicit drug activity, but everything from Islamic extremism to human trafficking of primarily women in the sex slave industry. It goes on and on and on. But budget cuts mean reduced functions, which mean the bad guys get through more often. The number of assets we have dealing with transnational organized crime in SOCOM, and I'll just give you the example, I'll use the military's example for a second. In order to track the illicit movement of drugs up from South America through Central America and of course into the United States, we do that in a number of different ways. The first thing we need is a great deal of ISR capability. Those are aircraft with sensors on them, fly over the ocean, Caribbean or the East Pacific, and pick up what we think are drug boats. And we're pretty good at it, actually very good at it. And then once these are found, then we vector either Coast Guard cutters, U.S. Navy Coast Guard cutters, U.S. Coast Guard cutters, or Navy ships. And for that matter, our partners, everyone from Colombia and a tremendous partner in this effort, the Chileans, the Peruvians, moving further north, the Panamanians, Nicaraguans are really close allies in this drug fight, the Hondurans, the Guatemalans. We can vector their navies or coast guards as well to pick up the go-fast boats or the so-called pangas, or even the aircraft that are flying in out of Venezuela directly into Latin America. So we need ISR, surveillance, reconnaissance aircraft, or surface ships or cutters to do that work. As I mentioned just a few minutes ago, you cut money, you cut flight hours, that means a cut in flight hours, that means a cut in steaming days for ships and cutters, which means you're less effective in this drug fight, and that's just one example. Well, last year we got roughly when the drugs left the large continent of Latin America, and the target for the smugglers is to leave Colombia, Ecuador, places like that, Venezuela, and to get to the ungoverned spaces, particularly on the Caribbean side of Honduras and Guatemala. And then the drugs enter an amazingly efficient distribution network that is, would be the rival in terms of the efficiency of UPS or FedEx. So once it gets ashore, really, it's nonstop into the United States in large tonnage. So the most efficient place to get it is while it's on the high seas, And as I say, either go-fast boats or aircraft or pangas, fishing boats, to get it on the high seas. Last year we got something on the order of about 175 tons, metric tons. It's a massive amount of drugs. It's a big chunk of what starts its journey to the United States. If you don't have ships to stop it, you know, X number of ships equals Y amounts of hundreds of tons. If the X number of ships is lowered, then just more drugs get through. Our partners in Latin America, with the exception, unfortunately, of several countries, Venezuela being one, of course, Bolivia, Ecuador, Argentina, they don't want to partner almost under any circumstances. That's their business. I think they miss out because they've isolated themselves not only from the benefits of an association with the United States, but also with many of their own Latin American brothers and sisters. But with the exception, the countries in Latin America want to be associated with the United States. They want our partnership. They want it on their own terms, and certainly we all endorse that. You know, the Brazilians are a world power. The Brazilians, I think, have the 5th largest economy in the world, and they're playing that role. So our relationship with Brazil would be, say, very different than our relationship with Colombia. Colombia is a solid friend of the United States. We've stood with them in their absolute agony in terms of dealing with the drug lords in their country, as well as the FARC. Well, they're emerging from that now, and they're a success story. But they want a different relationship with the United States than Brazil. And then if you just go up and talk to the Chileans, they want a little bit of a different relationship. They all have their own national needs. Interestingly enough, I have found that for the most part, they very seldom ask for very much. They're not asking for a lot of money. They're not asking for F-16s. They're not asking for things that they can't afford or that they don't need. They typically just ask for some training, some advising. They like to send their officers and NCOs to American schools at Quantico at the Marine base, or Leavenworth, say, at the Army base, WINSEC, the school that we run in Fort Benning. So they ask for very, very little. But the key point is they want us in their lives, and they want to do these things on their own. So we're not asking them to do things. We're not doing it for them. So I think it's kind of a perfect mix. People that want to do it themselves, ask for very little, but share the same kind of things that Americans share in terms of family, democracy's on the rise, they're against drugs. It's a great partnership, and I think sometimes in America we've failed to recognize that. It's not the Latin America of your grandfather or your great-grandfather. It's a very different place. It's very much a place that is dedicated to, as I say, to democracy, to human rights, to rule of law, but some of them are in desperate struggles against the money that comes out primarily out of the U.S. drug trade. Well, we do an operation in Spanish, Martillo, and English, Hammer, that operates in the littorals, particularly that start on both sides of the Panamanian Isthmus, both sides of Central America, on the Caribbean side and the Pacific side. We work with those partners very, very closely in interdicting drugs. Joint Interagency Task Force South, it's a sub-command under SOUTHCOM, operates out of Key West. It's very much, although it's a military organization, it's very much an interagency organization. We have representatives from every government agency, as well as a number of liaison officers from our partners in the South, and also Canada, France, and Britain. And it's a information and intelligence fusion center there that gives us a very, very good picture of transnational organized crime activities in the Caribbean, in Latin America, particularly as it's making its way up into the United States. So that's a second organization. It's just the U.S. military partnership programs in general. I mentioned the fact that Latin American partners love to send their folks, their officers and whatnot, to U.S. military schools. They very much prefer to purchase law enforcement equipment and military equipment from the United States. Why? It's the best in the world. We upgrade it regularly. It comes with a sustainment package, but unfortunately, it's oftentimes difficult because of our various rules and regulations to buy this from us. So unfortunately, they'll oftentimes turn to other countries to purchase it because it's faster. They get tired of waiting. But those are the kind of programs that work for us in Southern Command.